Thank you for joining us again on the morning call. It is the United Nations 73rd General Assembly, and on Tuesday, the first batch of leaders addressed the Assembly. They included U.S. President Donald Trump, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Iranian President Hassan, Rouhani, and France's President Emmanuel Macron. So what about Africa's leaders? I'll leave Barbara to tell us about what happened yesterday.
Good question, Jerry. Several world views have opposed the UN, and there are a few speeches that haven't gone unnoticed, in particular that of Rwandan president, known for not mincing his words. Paul Kagame was the first African president to speak, and he took the opportunity to point out that Africa has less need of external mediation. Another speech was that of President Joseph Kabila. He denounced the interference of the UN MONUSCO mission in his country and once again called for its departure.
Well, let's go now for some more details. We have our correspondent with us from New York, Emmanuel. Thank you for joining us on the program, Irene. It's good to be back with you today for the updates. Let's begin first on a general outlook. From what we saw yesterday, the UN Secretary General urged heads of states to restore confidence in an increasingly chaotic world where people no longer feel safe. Could you tell us more on this address, and what does he mean when he says this?
According to Antonio Guterres, trust is at a breaking point. Trust in national institutions, trust between states, or trust in the rules-based world order where the weak suffer from the whims of the strongest. Without citing examples, he pointed out that societies are increasingly fragmented and that global challenges are forcing people to withdraw. And so for him, the solution would be a better strengthening of multilateralism, which unfortunately is threatened at a time when the world needs it the most. This is why he urged leaders to promote the well-being of their peoples, not in self-sufficiency, but together in a context where each must respect the other in full responsibility. Guterres also spoke about what he believes is a direct threat to our lives, which is climate change.
Irene, we've also seen U.S. President Donald Trump and the French President Emmanuel Macron give their own addresses on the first day. What can be learned from their statements, from their speech?
It was obviously a head-on war between these two heads of state, particularly on North Korea and Iranian issues. French President Emmanuel Macron called for a solution to the Iranian crisis through dialogue and multilateralism, shortly after a request from his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump, to isolate the Iranian regime. Macron also called for no further trade agreements with countries that do not comply with the Paris Climate Agreement. Remember, Washington recently withdrew from this agreement. The American president, on his part, attacked the International Criminal Court, which for him has no legitimacy and no authority. However, he indicated that his country would not give any support or recognition to this court, which, in his opinion, claims almost universal jurisdiction over the citizens of all countries in violation of the principles of justice and equality. In other words, he favors patriotism over the ideology of globalization.
Irene, and it's interesting how we see the Iranian president and U.S. President Donald Trump taunt each other with their policies in their speeches yesterday. But what are some of the other events that marked Tuesday? As a matter of fact, what were the burning issues for Africa?
Dozens of meetings are held every day here at the United Nations, so imagine the picture at this time of the general debate. However, yesterday, with regard to Africa, the humanitarian issue in southern Sudan was at the center of discussions at a meeting held on the margins of official activities. Several humanitarian actors operating in the country have come together to replan their modus operandi in order to relieve the South Sudanese population, who are practically living in panic. The leaders also held a high-level meeting on migration in Africa. The objective is to identify mechanisms that can enable governments to better control migration movements, especially of young people in all countries of the continent.